I'm Natasha Kirchuk, and welcome to ILTV's Weekly Review. We know how hard it can be to keep up with the latest news in Israel, so if you haven't had the time to stay on top of what's what in the Holy Land with ILTV, have no worries. Sit tight because we're about to give you the scoop on everything you need to know about the last 7 days right here from Tel Aviv. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu will be wrapping up what he's calling an enormously successful trip to Washington today, with even more meetings with senior American officials. Later this morning, the Israeli leader will be holding talks with U.S. Vice President Mike Pence. So far, Netanyahu's held other closed-door talks with Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell and Minority Leader Chuck Schumer, as well as their counterparts in Congress. All of the discussion centered on the issues of Iran, Syria, Hezbollah, and the Palestinians. House Speaker Paul Ryan added that he also spoke with the visiting premier about ways to bolster Israel's qualitative military edge, while also fighting international efforts to delegitimize the Jewish state. Netanyahu also met with Republican Senators Lindsey Graham, John McCain, and Bob Corker. The latter heads the Senate Committee on Foreign Relations, which will be holding its first confirmation hearing of U.S. President Donald Trump's pick for ambassador to Israel, David Friedman, later today. Of course, the apex of the Israeli Prime Minister's trip to Washington was his summit with U.S. President Donald Trump. In the first face-to-face meeting between the two leaders since Trump's victory in the 2016 election, the Republican president dropped a political bombshell by backing away from supporting the eventual creation of a Palestinian state. His position upends the long-standing bedrock of Middle East policy taken by successive administrations as well as the international community. Trump is vowing to work toward achieving a peace deal between Israel and the Palestinians, but says it will require compromise on both sides, and that it's up to the parties themselves to ultimately agree on the terms of any prospective agreement. Several American Jewish groups are now voicing dismay over that stance and publicly reaffirming their own commitments to a two-state solution. Meanwhile, even though Trump is also somewhat unexpectedly urging Israel to curb settlement construction, Netanyahu remains extremely upbeat.
We had a great meeting. We're going to discuss this issue among other issues, but I have to say that I think the strength of the American-Israeli alliance has never been as good. Certainly it's going to get even better.
On settlements, though?
I think we'll try to find a common understanding that is consistent with the pursuit of peace and security.
Those statements were echoed by the White House in a later statement that underscores both leaders' goals to reach a mutual understanding of the issue. The Israeli Prime Minister is making his conviction clear that Jewish settlements aren't the core of the conflict with the Palestinians, and he's also holding back on committing to restricting building in the disputed territories. The topic on which there is absolute agreement, though, is the threat posed by Iran. According to the White House release, both men agree the 2015 pact was a terrible deal for the U.S., Israel, and the world. And the U.S. president is reassuring the Israeli Prime Minister that Iran will never be permitted to obtain nuclear weapon capabilities. Every year, Iran commemorates the anniversary of its 1979 Islamic Revolution with mass nationwide rallies and speeches blasting Israel and the United States. This year was no exception, although the U.S. president was targeted by even more scathing rhetoric than usual. Demonstrators in Tehran and similar rallies across Iran gathered to swear allegiance to the Islamic Republic's extremist clerical establishment, and specifically protest against President Trump. Iranian President Hassan Rouhani is urging his nation's faction-ridden elite to seek unity, amid increased tensions with Washington.
در دنیا هم در آمریکا بعضی از تازه‌کاران قدرت را در دست گرفتند. همه اونها باید بدانند در برابر ملت ایران تنها باید با احترام و تکریم با این ملت بزرگ حرف بزنند.
Crowds of demonstrators responded by screaming "Death to America" and waving signs reading "Down with the USA." Others carried posters with images of Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and British Premier Theresa May, printed with the slogan, "Iranians are not scared of threats," as Rouhani declared that all resistance to his regime will be overcome.
ما در برابر هر گونه تهدید و نابخردی با آتش افروزی با خرد با استقامت با ایستادگی با قدرت خواهیم ایستاد.
Many marchers are slamming Trump's controversial traveler ban on 7 Muslim countries. That includes Iran. Some of the banners sarcastically thanked Trump for showing the real face of America, while other signs expressed gratitude to the American people who are opposing his executive order. Trump also just slapped new sanctions against Iran's ballistic missile program, which Rouhani defiantly vows to continue. The Iranian boss is also voicing support of the 2015 nuclear deal, saying it protects the Islamic Republic's rights to atomic power. Both Netanyahu and Trump have been highly critical of that pact and Tehran's missile development, which are bound to top discussions when they meet at the White House on Wednesday. One of the topics discussed between the Israeli Prime Minister and the U.S. President is garnering a great deal of interest today, and it's all about how regional cooperation from regional Arab states is countering the Iranian threat from behind the scenes. The Wall Street Journal is reporting that the Trump administration is now trying to develop a NATO-like military alliance of Sunni Arab nations, who would consider an attack on one of the countries by Shiite Iran as an attack against all. The journal is citing an unnamed official who says that neither the U.S. nor Israel would be directly part of the arrangement, but would actively support the group. Israel's role is likely to be intelligence sharing, at which the country particularly excels. This mutual defense union is believed to include Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates, among others such as Israel's peace partners Jordan and Egypt. According to the source, these nations' diplomatic missions in Washington are already being asked to join the new force. He says that the Jewish state is one of the most sophisticated and technologically advanced countries in the field of mining and a world leader in the water engineering industry, both of which are of major interest to Riyadh. While Jerusalem currently holds no formal ties to most of the Arab states, there's reportedly been a warming of relations amid secret talks on matters of regional security in recent months, with emphasis placed on Iranian expansionist aspirations. Gaza's ruling Hamas movement has chosen a convicted terrorist as its new chief in what's widely being interpreted as an affront to Israel. Yahya al-Sinwar was selected to replace Ismail Haniyeh during an internal election that was last held in 2012. Israel considers Sinwar as one of the terror group's worst masterminds and sentenced him to 4 life terms in prison. But after 23 years behind bars, he was released, along with 1,046 other Palestinian prisoners in the 2011 exchange for Israeli soldier Gilad Shalit. Shalit had been held captive by Hamas for 5 years. Sinwar will now work with Hamas leadership abroad to make policies, including those regarding the Jewish state. One former Israeli Shin Bet security agent says Sinwar is expected to take a much harder line against Israel. Some Gaza political analysts say the appointment is meant to send a message of defiance to Israel, but acknowledge that it's also very likely to further complicate reconciliation efforts with Hamas's bitter Palestinian rival, the Fatah faction of PA President Mahmoud Abbas. Others point out Sinwar's victor could cement relations with Arab and Muslim nations.
نعتقد خلال المرحلة القادمة ستشهد مزيد من تطور البناء التنظيمي داخل حركة حماس ومزيد من تطور الأدوات القتالية سواء كان على الصعيد العسكري وعلى الصعيد أيضا السياسي. فالسنوار شخصية براغماتية لديه تطلع بأن يكون لديه انفتاح واسع في العلاقات مع المحيط العربي سواء مصر، إيران، الدول العربية مجتمعة.
The sources said Sinwar polled best in the vote that was open only to members of Hamas, including those in Israeli jails. Gaza residents are greeting the news of his appointment with hope that he will usher in an era of improved stability and peace.
بتمنى أنه يكون توجهات حركة حماس خلال الفترة القادمة نحو تحقيق آمال وطموحات الشعب الفلسطيني في الاستقرار، تحسين الاقتصاد، تحسين الظروف المعيشية للشعب الفلسطيني في قطاع غزة، تعزيز صمود أبناء الشعب الفلسطيني في القطاع.
فعشان يكون قائد يحسبها صح، انه يحاول قدر الامكان يعمل خطط استراتيجيه، يعمل حلول ومفاوضات، مثلا صفقه وفاء احرار او اي خطه ثانيه، لانه لو هو بده يودي غزه لحرب جديده، غزه مش جاهزه ابدا، الشعب مش جاهز ابدا، بكفي ويلات، بكفي حروب، بكفي نزف دم.
There are several interesting developments at the United Nations as the new Secretary General takes the helm. While one Israeli diplomat may be selected to serve in a key position, Washington overruled the appointment of a Palestinian candidate for another post. The UN's top boss Antonio Guterres personally called Israeli Zionist Union member of Knesset Tzipi Livni to tell her she's on his short list as the next Under-Secretary General of the world body. Livni held talks with Guterres at UN headquarters in New York City 2 weeks ago, but denied any firm offers were made at the time. Sources close to both Livni and the Secretary General say there's no connection whatsoever between her potential nomination and the dismissal of former Palestinian Prime Minister Salam Fayyad as the next UN envoy to Libya. U.S. Ambassador to the UN Nikki Haley nixed Fayyad's appointment because she says that the UN has been unfairly biased in favor of the Palestinian Authority for too long. Haley also stressed that the U.S. doesn't recognize a Palestinian state and is against the kind of signal that would be sent by affirming the appointment of the former PA leader. Israel's UN ambassador Dani Danon enthusiastically welcomed the decision, saying it ushers in a new era at the UN in which the United States now stands firmly and unapologetically beside the Jewish state. In a surprise move to the world, Israel's foreign ministry has quietly pulled the ambassador of Egypt, David Gavrin, out of the country and brought him back to Jerusalem. The stated reason for removing the Israeli foreign diplomat was for security concerns, but ILTV's Aaron Porras has more on the story. Aaron.
Thank you very much, Natasha. And yes, you're right. As you said, the Israeli Foreign Ministry did state security concerns for their reason to pull Gavrin out of Cairo, but they didn't really specify what those concerns are. But given the insurgencies and a lot of the events that have been happening in the Sinai over the last few years, it certainly leaves a lot to consider.
Gavrin was appointed in August of 2016 to fulfill the role of the 13th ambassador to Egypt since 1979, when Israel and Egypt re-established diplomatic relations. Speculations into why the ambassador's tenure was cut so short lie primarily on the Sinai branch of the Islamic State terror organization, which has been increasingly terrorizing the country over the past few years. Egypt has suffered attacks by them a multitude of times since 2011, including bus bombings, hostage crises, and attacks on civilian religious institutions. In September of 2013, just 2 months after Islamist President Mohamed Morsi was ousted, Egypt banned the Muslim Brotherhood. According to the chief of Egyptian military intelligence, Mohammed Farag al-Shahat, the banned militant supporters of the movement have since allied themselves with the Islamic State, making the near-decade-long insurgency issue that much worse. Since 2015, the Egyptian army has claimed to have killed over 500 Sinai Peninsula Islamic State-affiliated fighters. The Islamic State, though, has also since claimed the lives of hundreds of Egyptian military men and civilians as well, most notably when they claimed responsibility for killing over 200 passengers and crew of a Russian airliner. Spillover violence has also had its effect on Israel. In late January of 2017, the Israeli Counterterrorism Bureau at the Prime Minister's office advised Israeli travelers to leave the country, raising the risk of attack to level 1, the highest level. Then last week, the Islamic State claimed responsibility for 4 rockets aimed at Israel's southernmost tourism hub, Eilat. The Iron Dome intercepted 3 rockets, leaving the 4th to fall in an open field. Israel's ambassador to Egypt from 2003 to 2005, Eli Shaked, in a statement to the Telegraph News, said that while he was often alarmed of security threats, it was never enough to warrant leaving the country, though he continued saying it was different then. Nowadays, the security problems are much tougher.
Yet another shell fired from Syria has landed in the Israeli Golan Heights, but luckily no one has been injured. The errant shell reportedly landed in an open area, and unconfirmed reports from Syria claim it was fired by the Syrian military. The missile was supposedly being fired on rebel forces in the village of Hamidiyah, which lies in the demilitarized zone near the border of Israel. This isn't the first time that an errant shell from Syria has hit Israeli land. Just last week, the IDF fired at a Syrian government position in the Golan Heights after a tank shell landed in Israel. That shell also didn't hurt anybody, but the IDF retaliated by directly hitting a Syrian army position. The Israeli government has consistently made it clear that Israel holds the Syrian government responsible for all errant fire, regardless of where it's coming from, and says it will continue to retaliate every time Israel is hit. We have some great news for the Israeli Bedouin population. The Israeli cabinet has just greenlighted a socioeconomic plan aimed at significantly improving the community's standards of living. The 5-year, $800 million project is geared to more greatly integrate the Bedouin into mainstream Israel. Toward that end, 10 new industrial compounds and 25,000 housing units are going to be built in predominantly Bedouin areas between 2017 and 2022. It also includes the availability of increased job training programs and even better public transportation. Jerusalem wants to boost the entry of the 240,000 Bedouin living in southern Israel into the national economy. Right now, only about 64% of Bedouin men have jobs, and only around 25% of the women work outside the home. And in keeping with the goal of improving the lives of young women and girls in the Arab tribal community, the cabinet also recently adopted another plan to reduce its Islamist practice of polygamy, which is illegal in the Jewish state. Now, get this, Israel's travel junkies have a whole new trip to look forward to because North Korea is now planning to issue tourist visas to Israelis. The East Asian nation has come under major scrutiny from the West for its nuclear program, human rights violations, and provocative missile tests. But that's not stopping one Israeli tourism agency. Rimon Tours now has an exclusive agreement to issue tourist visas for North Korea and will start offering trips come spring and summer. According to estimations from the agency, as of today, only 100 Israelis have visited North Korea on organized trips in the past. Up until now, Israelis interested in visiting the controversial nation have had to apply for entry through Chinese tour agencies. Right now, Rimon Tours is offering 4 tours throughout April to May and is reassuring travelers that the country's military programs and nuclear research will not affect tourism. Just yesterday, South Korea claimed that North Korea fired a projectile missile into its eastern sea in a supposed effort to advance its weapon program. Human narcissism is about to be taken to a whole new level, and it's all because of a new Israeli startup. It's time to forget your typical selfie stick because a Tel Aviv-based company called Selflie has just created a detachable phone case that turns into a flying camera drone. I guess that means we'll really have the chance to capture our daily experiences from a whole new angle. Selflie is an autonomous flying camera that doubles as a phone case. If you want to take a picture, all you have to do is detach it from the back of your phone and release it into the air. You can then control it using an app on your phone to take the selfie of your dreams. Now, what's really interesting about the Selflie app is that the drone moves based on how you manipulate your photo on the phone. In other words, the camera follows flight patterns based on the way you move the image you're now seeing on your cell. The Tel Aviv-based creator of Selfie Drone has launched a Kickstarter campaign to help fund the mass production of the device, and they've already received over $370,000, almost twice the amount that they've pledged. The first buyers are expected to receive their orders in June, and I might just be on that list myself. Scientists currently estimate that between 150 and 200 living species of plants, insects, birds, and mammals become extinct every 24 hours. This tragic loss is greater now than any time in world history since the vanishing of the dinosaurs nearly 65 million years ago. Now, one Israeli zoological center has just launched the Ark of Life project to preserve as many endangered animals and birds as is possible. Noah collected all the animals and saved them from extinction years ago, and now it's our turn to do the same. That's what Dr. Yigal Horovitz says, who's heading the project. The chief veterinarian of the Ramat Gan Safari Park outside Tel Aviv also told the Israel 21C news outlet that in the biblical story, Noah saved the animals because of a flood, while today's crisis is caused by people harming nature, and the modern ark is composed of containers of liquid nitrogen. The initiative is being launched with the help of 2 German zoological institutes and involves the creation of a DNA tissue bank that's specifically focused on animal and bird species expected to become extinct in the next few years. The Ark of Life is a first conservation effort of this type in the Middle East. The Israeli experts say these precious samples can be stored for as long as 3,000 years. It's very much hoped that future technological advances will be able to utilize this frozen Israeli zoo. Perhaps one day it can be used to save the last remaining members of a species or recreate certain organs for transplants and even possibly bring entire species of animals who no longer walk the earth back to life. Now, here's an unusual but heartwarming story. Snails. They may not exactly be your ideal pet, but here in Israel, veterinarians are making it their mission to save the lives of these tiny creatures. Anyone who lives in an area where there are snails probably knows how awful it is to accidentally step on one. Well, that's what happened to a woman in Tel Aviv, but instead of just leaving it there, she rushed her slimy victim to a veterinary clinic for help. There, doctors meticulously cared for the little snail, who they even named Chevy, and eventually put him back together again. Let's just say, though, that recovery occurs at a snail's pace and can actually take several months. After they posted their success story on Facebook, it drew in so many likes, shares, and requests for further information that the vets decided to even add instructions about how their followers can help out the little creatures themselves. In fact, one of their earlier patients, named Hilik, lives such an adventurous life he has actually been brought in for treatment twice. Now, if you'd like to access information about how to save a snail yourself, just search for Haklinika on Facebook, which is how you say the clinic in Hebrew. With all this love in the air, we thought it was only appropriate to share this heartwarming video of an Israeli proposal to remember. The Israeli Defense Forces sure do know how to celebrate. That's it for this week's Roundup. Tune in next Friday for our next episode of Weekly Review. I'm Natasha Kirchuk, and thanks for joining us from Tel Aviv.